Thanks, David. Much appreciated. So I'm an MD CEO of EMVision, also a co-founder. For those that aren't familiar, we're now headquartered in Macquarie Park, and we have a small team based out of the Translational Research Institute in Brisbane. Might try and, David, if we could pin my video, that would be helpful. I don't know if that's working. Hopefully people can get a good look. All right, so we are developing two products to reduce the global and societal burden of stroke. Our first product here is our Generation 1 device. It's a cart-based brain scanner designed for in-hospital use. I'll give you a little bit of a run-through of how this device works and its value proposition shortly. And then we also have our second generation helmet model designed for road and air ambulance. And what we're focusing on is to provide rapid brain imaging insights in environments and settings where clinicians need urgent brain imaging. There's a time-sensitive medical emergency like stroke, but there is limited access or no access to CT or MRI. And those two machines really are the standard of care today in brain imaging. CT came out around the 70s, MR 80s, and fantastic images as we all know, but very large, complex machines, a lot of infrastructure requirements, a lot of expense, and really not widely available at the point of care. Even the mobile versions are still 600 odd kilos and driven like a forklift. So that's the real unmet need that we're seeking to solve. Environments where we need brain imaging, but there's nothing available at hand. Clinicians are restricted to observing the patient, questionnaires, exams, looking at their pupils, these kinds of things. So focusing on stroke. So the reason we're focusing on stroke is it is a huge societal burden. So the stats are really alarming. It's 1 in 4 adults will have a stroke in their lifetime. 2 out of 3 result in some form of permanent disability. The health economic impact is also huge. The burden globally, it's around 34% of all global healthcare expenditure is related to stroke. So that's both the upfront direct costs of care and looking after that patient initially, but long-term rehabilitation, assisted living care, and the like downstream. So huge burden, very effective interventions and treatments, incredibly time sensitive. So time is brain is the common theme in stroke, and it's just been National Stroke Week. So it's all about identifying symptoms of a stroke as quickly as possible, getting that individual to urgent stroke care, brain imaging, and the right centre for treatment and intervention if they're eligible. So here's our first generation device. I'll give you a quick run through on how it works. We have 3 of these devices currently at leading comprehensive stroke centres in Australia as part of our clinical trials, so Liverpool Hospital, Royal Melbourne, and Princess Alexandra, and I'll talk a little bit about the trials in a minute. But one of the key value propositions of the device is it's a lot like ultrasound. So it's on a cart, it's portable, it's easy to maneuver, and it doesn't require all this custom infrastructure and shielding that you do with a CT or an MRI. So this is all self-shielded, past DMC testing. It doesn't interfere with other equipment in the wards, in hospital environments, and that equipment doesn't interfere with our signals either. So we have a ring of antennas in our headset that send and transmit and receive signals. One sends, the rest listen, and that process happens in milliseconds. Our headset is designed to fit most of the adult population. So from 5th percentile, smallest female, to 97th percentile, largest male. We have a silicon membrane that inflates and deflates to accommodate different head sizes. And within that membrane, there is a coupling media. It's a gel-like substance that helps our signals penetrate into the brain. Now, like most medical devices, if there is an attractive potential consumable revenue stream, you want to pursue it. And we have 2 consumables, the first of which is an infection prevention cap. So that just plugs onto the headset to minimize any risk of infection or eradicate. And then the coupling media itself is replaced on a monthly basis. And we're targeting approximately $25 per scan between the 2 consumables, and approximately $150,000 US for the device itself. So I'll run through a demonstration scan with this phantom head, and what you'll see is it will inflate. So I should mention it's operated at the side of the bed. Because of the safety profile, non-ionizing, it it doesn't require a specialist operator or radiographer. So any healthcare professional with the appropriate amount of training can operate our device. So in our trials at the moment, nurses, for instance, are doing a significant volume of the scans. And so what you'll hear now, you may hear, hopefully, is the fluidic system is pumping the membrane up to fill with that coupling media, which effectively removes the gap between our antennas and the head. It's as if the antennas are flush on the head. And I've been scanned quite a few times, and it's relaxing. I joke it's a bit like a scalp massage at the barbershop. It's not in any way claustrophobic like an MRI can be for many people, and is non-invasive. So once the system is fully inflated, the scan itself is very, very quick. We'll run through the scan now. And what it will do is it will output an example image from one of our earlier studies that we published out of the Princess Alexandra Hospital. That was a early successful proof of concept study with 50 confirmed strokes. So that's the length of the scan cycle. From moving it to the bedside, doing the whole workflow, performing the scan, we're targeting under 10 minutes at a minimum. We do plan for a preventative maintenance and service contracts as part of the revenue model. They typically represent about 10% of the capital equipment per annum. What we also have is 2 scan positions to cover the entire brain. In our earlier prototype, there was a solitary scan position. You can see the liquid. It's going back through the fluidic system into the container. And hopefully there might be a bit of glare on the screen, but hopefully you can see the output. If not, on the ASX, you'll see our past presentations with examples of the images. And what we're doing is anatomical reconstructions of the brain, so inner, outer boundary, grey matter, white matter, ventricles. And then we have a separate series of algorithms that will determine if a stroke is present, so is stroke or not. If there is a stroke, is it ischemic or hemorrhagic? If it is ischemic, is it potentially a large vessel occlusion? Where is it in the brain? So localizing it as well and show a picture. And it's important to appreciate, I mentioned we're not trying to replace a CT when there's a CT in the room, but and likewise with an MRI. There's always a trade-off. But what we are expecting are images that are of suitable quality, good enough quality to drive a transfer, triage, or potentially treatment or intervention decision at the point of care when there's limited access to other modalities. So it's an additional tool in the toolkit that's portable, easy to operate, and fills a gap in environments where there is nothing today. So that's our Gen 1. In terms of where we are at the moment, we're running a multi-center clinical trial. We have 2 phases to this trial, a pre-validation, which is the one we're running at the moment, and then a validation phase. The objectives of the current phase, in no particular order, are safety, hardware verification, usability, and more data to feed into our AI algorithms. And then the subsequent phase is a validation phase to confirm sensitivity, specificity. We intend to take that data to the major regulators, FDA, etc. At the moment, in stage 2 of our study, we are enrolling 150 suspected strokes. So these are patients presenting to the emergency department with stroke-like symptoms, and they will be assessed. If suitable, they'll be enrolled. They get a standard of care, so a CT, for example, and then we get a scan immediately afterwards for intervention, for treatment, but not slowing down the process. And then if there are follow-up scans, day 2, day 5, etc., follow-up CT, follow-up MR, we'll also get a scan then. And 150 suspected strokes, so some of these patients will end up being mimics, so patients that come in with migraines, epilepsy, rare cases brain tumours, and approximately half may be confirmed ischemic or hemorrhagic stroke. So we're getting data to support the application of our device up front in, for example, rural and regional settings where there is limited CT access to inform those really important transfer triage decisions and potentially treatment decisions, but also follow-up scans to help us understand response to treatment, complications. There's a whole host of things that can go wrong once a patient is in ICU or in the stroke ward. And it's very hard To move them down to radiology, it can take a few hours. Quite a few team members are involved in that transport process. And so if you can routinely monitor it, these patients, particularly high-risk patients, there's a good chance we can pick up complications much earlier and intervene earlier to reduce their length of stay in ICU. So that's all critical information. We have a fantastic clinical advisory board supporting us. We've got excellent support from the Australian Stroke Alliance, funded through the Medical Research Future Fund. Our team itself, so the senior leadership team is made up of Stuart Crozier, who's our Chief Scientific Officer. He previously licensed IP to Siemens and GE that's now in most MRs, so he's got a fantastic track record in medical imaging innovation. Farouk Khandan is our Chief Technology Officer, incredibly experienced, managed a team of around 60 engineers at Nanosonics to get the trophon to market. Christian Wright is our Head of Regulatory. He's got over 40, 50 FDA approvals under his belt. Robert Tiller heads up our design and is the founder of Tiller Design, a leading industrial design business. So we've got a fantastic team to get us through the process. In terms of the reimbursement landscape in the US, we're exploring things like the new technology add-on payment, which is a potentially attractive option for innovative technologies that are new to market. In parallel with all this clinical trial activity with our Gen 1 device, we have quite a few milestones coming up with our Gen 2, our helmet system. At the end of this quarter, we have an advanced prototype fabrication, and then moving into healthy volunteer studies with that device. And then next year, in partnership with the Australian Stroke Alliance, we are slated to run our first road and air ambulance studies with our helmet model. So we have two programs running in parallel. We're fortunate in that the team that have been responsible for developing the Gen 1 device and getting it to a production equivalent hardware have been able to be reallocated to our Gen 2 device now, and we haven't had to go out and hire a whole bunch of additional engineers to get this work done. So we operate on quite a low cash burn. And then looking forward into the go-to market for our product, we're going to be in Chicago in November at RSNA, which is the world's largest medical imaging conference. We're exhibiting there with a long-time collaborator of ours, Keysight Technologies. They're a US-based technology company, capped at about $30 billion, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We've got a fantastic relationship with Keysight, and RSNA will be showcasing our devices. And it's, I think there's over 24,000 attendees, radiologists, key opinion leaders, as well as a good place to engage with some of the large medical imaging OEMs as well. And in parallel with running our trials and getting through this regulatory approvals process, we're doing a lot of work to set up our go-to-market framework. And we do expect to use distributors in places like the US. So David, I've been talking a lot. I might throw to some Q&A if you've had some come in.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for that very insightful presentation. I think a lot of people watching today would not have seen how the technology works, understand the simplicity of it and the benefits of it from a clinical point of view. So thank you for giving us that insight. Now, we do have a number of questions that have come through. Just talk us through the benefits of going through the clinical trial and the approvals process for the Gen 1 device. What will that do in terms of speeding up the process of getting Gen 2 to market? Yeah, sure. So there's two sides to it. The first is the data that we're getting with our Gen 1 device at the moment supports the pre-hospital applications of Gen 2. Because we're getting suspected stroke patients, very acute strokes coming into the emergency department, it's the same type of patients that we'd be seeing with our Gen 2. So in terms of verifying and validating the underlying capabilities of our technology with that cohort, the Gen 1 nicely does that for Gen 2. From a regulatory perspective, it also becomes a predicate device. So we're going down the de novo pathway with the FDA at the moment. So this is for low to moderate risk devices, class 2. Class 2s like ultrasound, for example. And we're proving safety and performance from ground principles. And once we have that proved out, our follow-on products like our Gen 2, there's an opportunity there for them to pursue the 510K pathway, which is an expedited pathway to market. And what about IP protection? Sure. So we've got, it's around 13, 14 patent families across hardware, software, calibration techniques in various stages.
There's some in quite a few international with international filings now. There are quite a few trade secrets as well that we will remain as such. So, for example, the formula for our coupling media and certain techniques that this is really really complex technology. I showed the operation of the device, which is quite simple, but the underlying technology is quite niche. There's not a lot of groups worldwide that have been working on this, and it's very, very hard to replicate. And there's certain trade secrets without which it would be close to impossible to replicate the kind of outputs that we can generate.
Now, one interesting question that's come through in terms of manufacturing the product, have you settled on the manufacturing path and location?
So all these devices you can see here that have been built for our clinical trials have been done so in Macquarie Park, and we were fortunate to receive a $5 million Modern Manufacturing Initiative grant a couple of years ago. That's helped us get through our first production run and through to low volume production. So we have suppliers all over the world: Japan, US, China, and everything's assembled here. As we scale up, we certainly intend to keep that manufacture local in Australia, and hopefully we can pursue some further government initiatives to achieve that.
And do you have any other imaging applications beyond stroke?
Yeah, sure. So with the two brain scanner devices, we have ambitions to expand the indication out to traumatic brain injury. So effectively, we're talking about the same hardware, but a software upgrade to expand into that indication. We would need to run a smaller study to also prove out our capabilities with that specific cohort of patients. But there's significant interest from clinicians to look at traumatic brain injury and swelling in the brain. Every time we meet with our clinical advisory group, there's dozens of different use cases where they talk about a significant need for point of care imaging, but with nothing available. So it's just a matter of getting our stroke product into market, and then we can expand on our indications from there.
A good question has just come through from one of the viewers. In terms of your most recent ASX announcement, you talked about the fact that by the end of August, you should have or appear to have had 50% of the clinical trials conducted. When do you think you'll be starting to put that information out to market in terms of the outcomes of those trials?
So we've said that by next quarter, we expect to complete the enrolment of 150 patients. And our strategy generally in terms of presenting insights, findings, results of our study is really all around domestic and international podium opportunities. So major conferences that are well attended, that's really our strategy to get our results and findings out.
And there's a direct question here that probably makes more sense to you than it does to me. Any updates in the latest CAA Congress?
CAA, yeah. So so for those that might not be as familiar, so the CAA is the Council of Ambulance Authorities, industry body. We exhibited recently a couple of weeks ago. It's a really good avenue to connect with leaders in the paramedic field, in the pre-hospital setting. Some of our colleagues from Titan Telehealth were there as well. Again, you know, the common theme is when can we get our hands on this? But from our perspective as well, we're interested in broadening out our user groups to get feedback on the device, particularly the helmet device. And Robert Tiller, our head of design, has been spending a lot of time with different paramedic groups to go through the workflow, get their feedback on deployment, because ultimately we want them to be able to carry it in a backpack, take it into a patient's home, scan the patient there, and then send the information via telehealth. And you know, we know in ambulances, real estate is really limited. You know, they joke they count every bandage. So going through the workflow, where the device lives in the service centers, how it's stored, how it's maneuvered, all those things are critical to ensure that we can get as many ambulances to adopt the product as possible.
And just lastly, obviously this is an investor-focused webinar. From a cap structure point of view, are there any names on the register or cap structure positives that investors should be aware of?
Sure. So we have a low number of shares on issue, and we've kept it like that since our existence, with very minimal dilution. We've been able to do that on the back of approximately 20 million in non-dilutive grant funds that we've secured since inception. In terms of the register, founders, management directors own approximately 20%. So everyone has skin in the game. All our employees are shareholders as well. So we're all motivated to make this as successful as we can. We have a couple of institutions in the top 10 and some family offices as well that have been very, very loyal since early on.
Thanks, Scott. A great presentation, clearly a world-class technology, a company to watch, which we will do with interest. Look forward to following the company and its progress.
Thanks, David.